One of the things that I've learned about myself is I have a hunger and a desire to be better. Like it's that value, can I be better today than I was yesterday? And I'm at my best when I'm working around an incredible team like the one that we've built and really constantly challenging the norm. I think there's a lot of folks out there that they're wired just differently. They're great. Well, there's nothing against them, but they want to get into a lane and they want to kind of stay in that comfort. I'm at my best when things are more challenging and there's opportunity to go and explore something new.
Welcome to Multifamily Excellence, the podcast that explores the ever-evolving world of the multifamily industry. I'm your host, Jonathan Treble. In each episode, I'll spend time with a world-class multifamily leader to learn how they're continuously pushing boundaries for excellence. You'll get to hear their perspectives on career progression, leadership philosophies, and strategies for operational excellence. Hello and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Excellence. This episode is brought to you by my company, WithMe. WithMe makes people's lives better every day through convenient technology-enabled solutions for the multifamily apartment industry and beyond. Today's guest is someone whose name resonates across the industry. Dave Marcinkowski, a founding partner at Madera Residential, co-founder of Quext, and a visionary leader in multifamily real estate technology and community development. Dave brings over 30 years of experience transforming multifamily and driving innovation. From managing 80-plus properties to pioneering tech solutions, Dave exemplifies excellence in his multifamily leadership. Dave, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Dave, you've been in the industry over 30 years, and this show is about understanding multifamily leaders' unique career paths. Yours is certainly unique as a founder of your own firm. And from what I understand, you did it quite early in your career. So let's bring us back to early on in your life when you were deciding what to study and where to go to school. I think that's going to be an interesting launching pad for how you ended up in multifamily.
It is, but it's not probably what you think. So I was able to play small college basketball in Michigan at a school called Albion College. And I wasn't a great student in school. That probably goes without probably not doing it injustice. And I think if it wasn't for the opportunity to play basketball, I probably would have been able to go to a good school. I mean, my options were a junior college or one Division III school to play basketball. And went there. I don't know why. I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And so I took all these engineering classes and chemistry classes my freshman year and didn't do great. Struggled. Had a great basketball career and, kind of muddled my way through college. I pivoted to accounting because I found that it came very easy to, and didn't, my career path at the time, was really kind of clouded. What was different for me though, at the age of 11, I became a caddy at a pretty elite country club in the Detroit area, Oakland Hills Country Club. And, I caddied a lot. I would do 200 to 300 rounds of golf with really successful people from the time I was 11 until I graduated from college when I was 22. And that was really my education, was being around these really highly successful people for 5 hours at a time. And, most of them want to get to know you. They want to share their story. And so I was able to really glean a lot from folks. And my plan out of college was actually to become a professional caddy. That was kind of my dream. And I had a caddy master who was able to give me a bag down in Florida to go caddy and work at a country club there in the wintertime right after graduating from college. And I was going to go down there with a friend. And a couple of weeks before we're going to leave, my friend calls me up and, man, my parents have kind of guilted me into getting a real job. I'm sorry, dude, I can't go with you to Florida and caddy for the winter.
Okay.
So I had a choice. It's like, do I go down there by myself or do I get a job? And I chickened out. I didn't do the caddy gig. And I actually went to work for a temp agency with my accounting degree. And they placed me at Rose & Sons in Detroit, Michigan as a bookkeeper, which is a multifamily shop up there.
Yeah. I know it. Yeah.
I literally was a bookkeeper for the first 3 years of my career. Worked my way up from being a bookkeeper for a couple deals to 5 or 6 deals. I think I had over 3,000 units that I was bookkeeping for. And Ed Rosenthal, it was you wore a lot of hats in that role. I'd say it was a really assistant manager type of a role. But
Mhm.
I had to handle all the collections, resident complaints, plus bookkeeping and things like that, which at the time it was all manual. Like we printed off like literally 8.5 or by 14 paper mylar rent rolls. I had about
Wow.
60 page every month, and I was a 10 key. I would just add up numbers like a crazed fool. And I
Oh,
got to work really long hours and make some decent money and knowingly learn the apartment industry.
so they really were rent rolls back then.
They
That's
were
where it comes
really
from.
red
Okay.
rolls. Yeah. The only thing that required technology is in Michigan, it's a 7 day demand notice if you don't pay your rent. And we would have to key in data into a DOS-based system that would print off your 7 day notice that you would literally, I'd have to stay up and mail. And, I'd go to court for like 100 to 150 people every month and have to represent Ed Rose in the collections of these things. So I kind of got a legal background as well when I was doing this job. And I'm a fan of Ed Rose. I think what Warren Rose and the Rose family have built is awesome. Doing that job the way that I had to do it, I was miserable by year 3. And my name wasn't Rose, and my ability to really move within the organization was really limited. And so, I'm a Christ-centered person. I can remember driving to work one day and just having this overwhelming feeling that it was time to make a change. I literally drove into the office, walked in my boss's office, and gave my 2 weeks notice. Didn't have a plan, didn't know where I was going to go, but that was what I was going to do. And as fate would have it, within a couple of weeks, I was offered a job to go work for Marquette Management in Chicago as director of training. So from bookkeeping to training, and it was training everything, leasing, maintenance, managers, everything multifamily. And I kind of exaggerated, I really exaggerated to get the job. Yardi was just coming on the scene. I went to the library back then in 1995. You had to go to the library to get information. You couldn't pull it up on your phone. And I learned cool words like drill down and like back then that was the big, like I could run a general ledger to my screen. I could click on a transaction. I could drill down to the transaction. That was a cool thing that Yardi had built in their site-based process. So I took some key words. I went into my interview. I threw them out. They were going through the evaluation of Yardi. So I kind of hit a point where they really believed that I knew something about Yardi, even though I had no clue what I was doing. And I got the job, and I had to teach myself Yardi. It was my job to roll it out across our whole platform, across everything. And then I also had to build policy manuals and train every position within the multifamily space. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but boy, I multifamily from the inside out. My way of doing that is I go, who's the best manager that we have in our
Mhm.
organization? And I'd go spend a week with that manager, just following her in his or her shoes. Who's the best maintenance person or team?
Right.
And I would literally go and figure it out. I'd learn these practices, and then I'd go and write manuals around that, and I would train people across the platform. And as people would say, "Hey, we do it this way," I mean, like I then call the people that I was working with, and they'd say, "Yeah, that's actually the way." I'm glad I'd incorporate that into my manuals. And so over those first 3 or 4 years, that was my role, and I spent a ton of time on the road, and I really, again, unknowingly at the time, just learned multifamily industry from the inside out.
Hmm. Wow. And I know that your next step after Marquette was to start your own firm, and I'm so many questions about that as a fellow founder. But before we get there, and I know you spent 8.5 years or so at Marquette. So you went from 3 years at Edward Rose, 8.5 to Marquette. That's some serious tenure across those two companies early in your career, which doesn't happen as much these days for early career folks. I imagine that these experiences were quite helpful for you to have a foundation of knowledge to start your own business. And I could relate to that. I spent 4 years working for other folks before starting mine. Tell me how, just what were all the things you were learning, and did you like have idea when you were working at Marquette and Edward Rose that you would someday probably start your own venture and you were trying to soak up everything that you could?
No, it was like I was doing it because I needed a job. And I worked for, I mean, Ed Rose was a great company for me. It was a perfect starting point for me. It was an area for me to really get my feet underneath me, learn the industry, in the lowest, very low level in the organization. Marquette was all about personal development and helping leaders grow, and a lot of leadership development training at Marquette. That was what Nick and Rick and Bruno were all about. And that was huge for me because I think I didn't know it at the time, but I had these seeds inside of me, an entrepreneurial seed, a wanting to do more, wanting to always learn seed that I never really had an environment to be able to really grow those. And Marquette was really where I was able to kind of learn a lot about myself. And I'll tell you, it's not like it's easy. A lot of times it was really the times when I was most frustrated that forced me to step back and go, okay, why am I frustrated? What is it that's making me feel this way? And it usually was barriers. It was like, okay, you can't do that. Well, why can't I do that? Well, just cause like those, like I get really frustrated in that environment. So I'm like, well, that doesn't work for me. Like, let's talk about that. Let me see if I can challenge, see if I can move in that. I tell people all the time, I think growth really occurs in those. Well, I know it does. Growth occurs when you're uncomfortable. Growth occurs, it's hard. Growth doesn't occur when it's easy. And not that my career is necessarily hard. I kept pushing the envelope. I kept pushing myself into more challenging roles within Marquette. And I kept forcing me to have to learn more about myself. And again, it wasn't like I had this master plan. My master plan was I just was hungry. I found a passion and I wanted to explore it. And Marquette able to let me go to a certain level, probably a level higher than I ever thought imaginable at the time, but I wanted to do more. And the backstory to starting my own company really wasn't like I really want to start my own company. What I got to do that. I met a girl who was from Lubbock, Texas. I kind of ceiling at Marquette, just quite frankly. I mean, they allowed me to get to a certain point, again, like probably higher than I ever imaginable, but I still wanted more. My wife and I came down to Lubbock where right now, and I got to meet one of my partners. There were two partners at the time, two good, today still great friends who had started a company, fee management company. They needed an operations guy. They offered me the opportunity to come in as a partner to run the operations for, at the time, was called Stellar Management. And for the first, that was 2004. For the first 4 years, three to 4 years, it was fee managing probably some of the most challenging fee management opportunities you could have. But it was as an owner of the company, no longer as an employee. And so it's a big difference. You can be a C-suite in a company. It's one thing, you can have a lot of responsibility. It's not just owning your own apartment or owning your own business. And again, you just kind of organically, you kind of like grow into that role. You learn a lot. And I had a great time. I was loving it. Didn't really like the nothing against the people we were managing for, but we were doing a job. We were making a lot of people a lot of money, and we were making 3% management fee. It wasn't like you were killing. And so you're seeing how all this effort was resulting in really like scratching the surface on the potential. And it's not about making money, but in order to really grow, you got to get to something in which you put the work in, you get the risk, you get the rewards to allow you to continue to evolve as a person and as an organization.
Yeah, well said. A lot there. And then at some point, I know today Madera is vertically integrated and more, but at some point you began buying properties. And tell me about that transition from fee management to owner operator. I know it involves a lot more risk, a lot more capital. I imagine that wasn't easy.
Yeah, well, it was the catalyst behind it. So we were fee managing for a number of different people, and I'm going to keep out of it to protect the innocent on this, but there was a large group we're managing for. We found the deal. We helped them underwrite the deal. We created the plan for it. They put the equity up. We executed our plan on the deal, and they sold it and made roughly $30 million from the deal, which was, I
Wow.
mean, it was a home run. We bought a very challenging property. We executed a very aggressive plan. In 3 years, they made a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And they sent a thank you card for the work we did with a $1,000 check to thank us for everything that we had done. And we looked at each other as partners and said, man, we got this all wrong. We got to go and we got to go raise some. All we're lacking is we got to go be able to raise some money. And so we found a 392 unit property in Baytown, Texas, down near Houston, right up the shipping channel, called Baker Downs Apartments, that we were going to buy. It was, I was thinking it was probably the biggest train wreck of a deal. Good bones, kind of.
Okay.
Decent location.
Right.
85, I think it was 85 vintage, early 80 vintage property. But it had been owned by some people who didn't know what they were doing, and it was kind of running to the ground. Able to buy it really inexpensively. We were able to convince 6 guys out of Little Snyder, Texas, in West Texas, to put up $3.2 million. A couple farmers, a CPA, car dealer, an oil guy. I'm trying to think. I think I'm missing one. Put up the money, and we went and bought this deal in July of 2008, which I can now look back and say that was probably the worst time in human history to buy an apartment deal in probably the worst location you could buy an apartment deal. So here we are with this train wreck.
Wow.
Great timing, not great location as we thought it was going to be. September of 2000, 6 weeks or so after we bought it, Hurricane Ike comes pouring through, hits Houston.
Oh, no.
Totals like that area pretty bad. We didn't have named storm coverage on the deal, so we didn't have any insurance for. I don't remember what I don't think the lender required it, and we were trying to save nickels and didn't really think that through great. And then October of 2008, another 6 weeks later, the financial crisis hits, and Baytown and the shipping channel are just devastated. Our occupancy dipped. About half of those people that were living in our property weren't paying their rent. And it's like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Again, at the time, I mean, I lived in Baytown. My partners and I lived in Baytown for 2 years. I mean, we lived in the model at the property.
Okay. Wow.
We had to use a bunch of our capital dollars, fix insurance, hurricane damage. So about 2 years in, we actually had to go back to those same 6 guys in Center, Texas, and do a capital call. We had to get another $600,000 from them.
Wow.
And God bless them. They believed in us and they gave money. I could write this incredible story about how challenging that deal was. I mean, Murphy's Law to the nth degree. One of my favorite stories, we had this empty building 18 on the back of the property. And we kind of just avoided it. We had plans to renovate it, but we had to use those dollars to fix hurricane damage. So it was kind of taboo. And finally, we got to a point where we had a little bit of money, like a year and a half in, 2 years into the deal. I think it was with the capital. And I'm like, okay, let's go check out 18 and figure out how bad is it. And, walk into the building and we're like, man, these units aren't that bad. Like, okay, we can work with this. We get on the one end of the building and there's bees everywhere. We're like, okay, what's going on over here? We get into this one unit and the wall is like this burgundy color from floor to ceiling, and it looks like wet. And you go up to it and you're like, okay, what is that? And it ends up being what some people who seemed to know what they were talking about said was the largest Africanized honeybee hive. They literally take a 2-story wall off the building and bring a crane in to take out this massive honeybee. And it was Africanized. So they were like, we didn't realize people outside were avoiding that area because if you walked through that area, you're probably getting stung by bees. But that was the kind of stuff that we deal with all the time over at Lakes Madera. So I left a couple things out. We named that property, we read it the Lakes of Madera. So you wonder, where does Madera come from? It was the name of our
Mm.
first property.
Oh, okay.
So there were two little ponds that we called the lakes, and there were a lot of trees. And it was in a primarily like a Hispanic area. And so Madera is Spanish for wood. That was the trees. So we
Mm.
kind of took those words together, said lakes and Madera. That's where Madera came from. Um, I will tell you, like, we had people tell us that in the summer of 2008 in the Houston area, we were one of two known properties that didn't go back to the bank that were bought around the time that we did. And I mentioned it was a nightmare story while we were living it. But we ended up tripling our investors' money on that deal after 5 years because we
Tripling.
stuck.
Wow.
Yep, we ended up sticking with the plan. We ended up fighting through all the storms, and we ended up getting it to a point where we could sell it and give our investors back 3 times the money they put into it. Great story. Um, but it took a lot. It was painful. It's constant. And you lived it you didn't sleep. You lived in Baytown. And at the time I was miserable. I was like, man, God, I don't know
Mm.
how am I going to get through this? How are we going to, what's going on here? I look back at that, and that was what really was the springboard to the company that Madera is today. Because we realized, like, it brought us together as partners. It taught us that we can overcome whatever challenge that we're faced with. And so we took that, and we then started April of 2010, we bought our second deal, same investors.
Mm.
Bought 3 deals in 2010. I think it was 5 deals in 11. And then here we are today with about 12,000 apartment units in Texas. And it was just
Wow.
really an evolution and a growth. But it never would have, I think if we would have had it easy, and wouldn't be the company we are today. And I
I've
think,
I've seen that happen. If something comes way too easy the first time you do it, you just have this false confidence that everything else after is going to be as easy. It's probably a good thing you had it the hardest in the very
yep,
first deal, right?
yeah,
Wow.
I would have said time, I probably would have traded it away for anything because it just felt awful and it was miserable. That's where we were growing and we didn't even realize as when all this stuff was going on. And that's the thing. Like we're in a time that from a real estate guy hasn't been a pleasant couple years. But I can
Hmm.
lean back into those days of 2008, 2009 and say, you know what, we did it before. We can do it again. And I've got a
Right.
lot of peers who haven't lived through a down cycle who are going through their first down cycle right now, who are looking and going, man, I don't know how we're going to get through this. And it's been a blessing for me to be able to hopefully talk with to be able to talk with them and be able to say, listen, you can do it. You're going to get through it. You're going to come out the other side.
One thing I found out about Madera and you in my research is that you're a very values-based organization. And it seems like folks really stay at your company a long time. They like to work for you. What maybe it was in that first deal that you had to manage with your partners, maybe it came later. When did you realize that you needed to be so values-based and how important culture was within your company?
Yeah, I think realizing it was probably a couple of years after Lakes and Madera, we were starting to really take off as an organization. Like understanding,
Mm.
like we had values, um, but we had a lot of, you know, teamwork, values,
Mm.
entrepreneurship,
Mm.
values that I would say are more words than values. Like, not something you can really get your hands around. So it was, I think it was 2012, either 2012 or 2013, kind of came together and said, okay, what are our values? I'll tell you personally at the time, I was kind of going through a hard time. We were just to have real success. We were past, like some Madera, we're buying a bunch of properties, you know, um, starting to see success, kind of going through this personal journey of who am I to be successful? What is
Mm.
that? Like, and there was a lot of shame and guilt and some things that I don't even know. I know now, like what caused them, but at the time I didn't understand what was going on. So I had, even though you should look at me and say, man, you're having all this success, inside I
Mm.
was really struggling.
Mm.
And it led to this sort of personal journey around values. What do I stand for? What do we stand for? And what was interesting was we had as a value at Madera Christ as our first core value.
Mm.
And early on, I had a problem with that. I came from maybe parts of the country culture that was differently. That was like, you can't put your religious beliefs into your values or into your organization. You come down to West Texas where people wear that, like that they're proud of that. And not that everybody isn't proud of that, but there's sort of this cultural thing around it. Down here, it's very much like, yeah, okay, I think that's cool. It's not that it's just cool, but like, what does that mean to me? And as a Christian, like, I had to go through a bit of a journey of like, okay, can I make Christ a part of my whole life, including my work life? And man, it was easy. Once that light bulb clicked with that one, it was like, yeah, I can do that. And my partners were already kind of there. And so we could easily come together and say, yes, we are a Christ-centered organization, which means to people understand is like, that means the owners of the organization, the leader, like us, you don't have to be a Christian to work in Madera, but you need to know us as the owners of the company. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. We stand from like a biblical standpoint. We want to, easy things like the golden rule, it's like you want to be treated. But there's so many other things, like we ground ourselves in a Christ-centered world. The next one was community. Madera is a very big relationship company. Like people at Madera, we believe that 1+1 = 3, 4, 500. And I think that resonates with people. We're not a group that's going to come in and say, it's a dog eat dog world. It's us against them. We're more of a, let's go find friends and let's do stuff with them. And let's have a situation where everybody can win. And I think if you look at our trajectory of growth, that's what's worked for us. So we've done, like, we're a group that's like, okay, how do you make it work for a broker who puts a deal? What we tell them is like, listen, if you bring us a deal, we get the deal. You're going to get to sell the deal in the end. So this becomes something in which you're a part of that journey. You want us to be successful with that real estate deal because at the end, you're going to get to sell that deal. And you're going to be able to get another bite at the apple with it. I mean, that's a really basic one. There's vendor relations. We're not going to come in and beat you down to what's a win-win? We're always looking for win-wins. The third one, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, on that note, looking for win-wins, treating your partners like long-term relationships. I think that's so important in business generally. And maybe it sounds like it could be a bit different from what a lot of folks do in real estate, where, we were just at NMHC annual, though we didn't see each other. We were walking around the same halls. There's brokers, all the brokers are there. It seems like a lot of the deals are just kind of transactional, right? You seem to have a longer term view approach. Do you think that with either brokers or your vendors, has that been a unique channel of success for Madera?
It's absolutely a huge success for us. We're friends with the broker. We're friends with the people we buy deals from. We're not going to come in and Madera doesn't like to retrade. I mean, it would have to be something pretty grotesque for us to retrade. We come in and say, hey, listen, this is what we can do. Does this fit you as seller? What your box is? And we're not going to drag it out. Let's go get a deal done. And we're going to go do what we say we're going to do. You do what you say you're going to do. We're going to do what we say we're going to do. And let's win. And then you do that enough times and it gets out. Other sellers are like, hey, I want to work with Madera because I don't want to get into this transactional world where, everything's going to become like, how do I chop the legs out from underneath you a little bit more to get that minimal margin that,
Right.
To get the deal down? Because ultimately it comes down to how we execute our plan on that deal. Not that we want to make sure it's a win for us too, but we're not going to sit there and do it at the cost of a relationship. And I think that's played really well for us. I know for a fact we have not been the number one price point on deals that we bought, but they've been with groups that trust us to do what we say we're going to do. And so they will take us at our word, and then we go and we do that. And then again, it's like that trust gets built up and people then lean into us more and more. In the vendor community, the same way too. I mean, you know how it is. I mean, we go through these ebbs and flows. Right now it's really hard for the real estate guys, and it's hard for Madera today to manage through this high interest rate. I mean, our debt service is remarkably high, insurance is high, taxes is high. We need vendors that will work with us, at this point in time. And same when things are tough, Madera needs to be there for them when they need us. And I think we've got I'm very proud of our track record as it relates to that. And I think too many times we're so short-sighted in our thought process around a win, and we lose how valuable that relationship could be.
So Dave, we're coming toward the end of the show. I always ask guests, what does multifamily excellence mean to you? you take a step back, you look at our industry and you think of how to perform the best way possible, how to be excellent, what do you think it comes down to in multifamily?
Well, I tell people this all the time. The multifamily industry, you don't have to be a Harvard graduate to be successful. I can, as a bookkeeper, can work my way up to being the founder of a real estate company. And that's the beauty of this industry is that I have so many peers that went through the same journey. Looks a little different, but it's the same thing. Start at the bottom, able to work their way up to the very top. And they didn't have to be geniuses to do it. They didn't have to have, some huge pedigree. They just had to work hard and want to learn. And that's what's so great about our industry. As it relates to excellence, I think it goes a lot to our third core value, which is constant and never-ending improvement. We want to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday. I think, when you think excellence, it isn't a destination, it's a journey. And I think that's the thing with multifamily. We're always should be evolving as leaders and as an industry to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday. And wherever you are in that journey, that's excellence. As long as you share that value and that's what your goal is, you're going to have success. If you want to come into this and go right to the top, if you want to come into this and, measure success based off of the size of your bank account, you can do that, but that's not going to lead to excellence. That's going to lead to, I think, more of a roller coaster ride. You're going to have ebbs and flows based on whatever the market is allowing you to do. Where even in a challenging environment like today, you can still sit there and pride yourself on excellence. Like for us, we can still be better today. This goes into some of the other vertically integrated things that we're doing as it relates to technology or other things that we're doing. Like this is a great time in our industry to be able to really challenge the norms of operations, to look at all this amazing technology that's coming down the pipe that's evolving every day, that's rapidly speeding up, and saying, how do I get on that wave as a real estate guy? And I think you're seeing some people do that now. Again, that's one example of many, but I think for me, excellence is about the willingness to look at this journey as a journey, not as a destination.
Well said. And as a fellow founder, I can relate to the idea that it's more about the journey, not the destination. I mean, I don't think you would have imagined at the beginning of starting Madera, you'd be at over 30,000 units, over 500 employees today, as successful as Madera is. And yet I'm sure you still have a drive to do more as you have with Quext, your technology arm, you have a banking arm, and you're still growing the portfolio. How do you manage that, kind of impulse or that tendency for founders to kind of not be content with what they've built, right? To always kind of want more. Is that something that you think about sometimes?
I do think about it a lot of times. And I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is I have a hunger and a desire to be better. Like it's that value, can I be better today than I was yesterday? And I'm at my best when I'm working around an incredible team like the one that we've built and really constantly challenging the norm. I think there's a lot of folks out there that they're wired just differently. They're great. Well, there's nothing against them, but they want to get into a lane and they want to kind of stay in that comfort zone. I think it's because of my personal experiences that I've had some challenges that I'm able to come where I'm at my best when things are more challenging and there's opportunity to go and explore something new. And that's a different world. And I hate it because I love it. That's who I am. And I've learned that about me. And that's the culture that I know we've built, but it's not for everybody. Mm. And what's been hard through this journey with me is, there have been people who can ride alongside me as a leader to a certain point, but it's uncomfortable and they have to get off. And that's okay. Or maybe not get off, but I got to stay. Okay. I can't keep at the front end of you, but I'll be in the back helping to support you. But, I keep driving the ship pretty hard in a particular direction. And, it's really been challenging to build a culture that can support that. I think we've done that now. And I think it's really exciting, but it doesn't happen overnight. And it takes a commitment, and it takes finding kindred spirits and souls to really be a part of that. What I can tell you is the other founders and owners and leaders in the multifamily industry that I've talked to, they're somewhere on that journey too. I tend to be more at the front of it because I think I got a passion for it, that I got an itch I got to scratch, and I keep driving that direction. But there hasn't been anybody that I haven't met who isn't about moving forward. And when they get to a point where they don't want to do that anymore, that's where you see companies start to, I think, take steps back. You see people start to retire and get out. It's just not me. It's just not me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. And I guess we're fortunate to have had some success up until this point, but it always feels like there's just so much more within arm's length, right? That we can do.
The thing I think I wanted to just kind of say it this way and see how this comes across. It gets really lonely when you're kind of wired the way that I think you and I are wired, and you're driving, because people are at different phases, and we keep driving, and people do their best, and this isn't a knock against anyone, but it's so important as leaders today that you find that community of folks that you can be around that can support you, even if it's just listening. And there's some groups that I'm a part of that are such an important part of my life, that are just, it's the people in those groups that are there. And a lot of them, it's both inside the industry and outside the industry. And I think as leaders in our space, if you're not finding that group that you can be a part of, you need to, because you'll find yourself burning out. You'll find yourself losing sight of the passion, and you'll allow yourself to settle. And I think as leaders, we need to be constantly supported and helped along the way. And those people aren't going to find you. You're going to have to find them.
Well said. I can relate to that as well. There's a lot of professional groups, especially in the tech and entrepreneurial world. Sounds like you're a part of one too, where founders come together. We can talk and share our. I'm in two so important to me. I'm in a group called the Abundance 360, which is Peter Diamandis' technology group. Oh yeah, I've read about that.
Yeah, I mean, so cool. Absolutely. I will tell you, the reason Quext is here, the reason, a lot of the tech stuff that we're doing, Peter and that group really, it was sitting inside of me, and I wanted to get it out. And those guys, just being around them, you just get that fire lit, and it was yes, let's go. Wow. And then I'm in a part of a group now it's a faith group. It's called CEO Forum. It's a leadership, Christ-centered leadership group. There's a couple of multi folks in there, but it's a lot of people from a lot of different groups and leadership roles. And they have been there for me when I've absolutely needed it. Didn't even know I needed it multiple times. So I say that I think it's worth sharing. If somebody's listening right now and you're a leader in an organization and you don't have whatever that group is, I would really strongly challenge you to go find those groups that can support you, because you need it. Whether you know it or not, you need it.
Yeah, I would second that. Definitely. And just like you said, those groups kind of appeared in my life. At times I needed it, didn't even know I needed it. And yeah, so well said. Dave, thank you for being on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Jonathan, thank you. This was great. Appreciate you, my friend.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining in for another episode of Multifamily Excellence. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue to explore the themes behind doing your very best and being excellent at multifamily. Until then, take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Multifamily Excellence, brought to you by WithMe. WithMe is making lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled amenities for the multifamily industry and beyond. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.